May 1945. Sugarloaf Hill, Okinawa. The air is thick with sulfur, mud, and death. Private Doc Peterson, a combat medic, crawls through the muck, machine gun fire still snapping nearby. He hears a moan. It's a Japanese soldier, face down in the sludge, his back shredded by shrapnel. Peterson, barely 19, moves on instinct. He approaches, his aid bag already open. As he turns the soldier over, their eyes meet. A brief, human instant. But then, the Japanese soldier's eyes harden. His hand, weak but deliberate, moves to his belt. Peterson sees it. A Type 97 grenade. He hears the faint metallic click as the man uses his last strength to pull the pin. He's holding the cap. He has 3 seconds. Peterson freezes. He carries no rifle. He has only gauze and compassion. And he is now facing an enemy who would rather die and take him with him than accept his help. By 1945, the war in the Pacific had devolved into a unique form of brutality. It was not like the war in Europe. This was a war of racial hatred, of extermination, fought on desolate islands thousands of miles from home. The American forces, led by the Marines and the Army, were executing their island-hopping campaign, a relentless, industrial-scale advance toward the Japanese homeland. This advance was methodical and overwhelming. It was defined by naval bombardments that shook the earth, by waves of aircraft dropping fire, and by logistical power that supplied endless streams of ammunition, food, and medicine. For the American GI or Marine, the war was a terrifying, violent job, but it was one with a purpose: to win and to go home. For the Imperial Japanese soldier, the reality was entirely different. He was not fighting to win, not anymore. He was fighting to die. The Japanese military was governed by a modern interpretation of the Bushido Code, twisted by nationalist propaganda. The 1941 Senjin-kun, or Field Service Code, explicitly stated that a soldier must not fall into the shame of being taken prisoner. Surrender was the ultimate dishonor, not just to the soldier, but to his family and his emperor. This doctrine created a battlefield unlike any other. The Japanese soldier did not surrender. When wounded, he did not call for a medic. He was taught that the Americans, particularly the Marines, were white devils and barbarians who would torture, mutilate, and kill any prisoners. His only honorable path, if wounded or cornered, was gyokusai, shattered jewel, or a glorious self-destruction. This philosophy turned every wounded soldier into a potential bomb. The Type 97 hand grenade, the standard-issue potato masher, became the tool for this final act. Japanese soldiers were trained to use it on themselves and, if possible, to take an American with them. They would feign death, clutching a live grenade beneath their chest, waiting for the telltale sign of an approaching American, often the Red Cross of a medic. This was the environment that the American combat medic was thrown into. He was not just a healer, he was a target. The American combat medic, or corpsman in the Navy Trotched Marines, occupied a unique and hazardous space. He was, by the rules of the Geneva Convention, a non-combatant. He carried no offensive weapons, perhaps a pistol for self-defense, but often just a Ka-bar knife. His primary weapon was his medical kit: sulfa powder, morphine syrettes, plasma bottles, and rolls of gauze. His job was to follow the front-line infantry into the very teeth of the fighting, to administer life-saving care in the first golden minutes after an injury. This work was inherently selfless, and it earned him a revered status among his fellow GIs. To the infantryman, the man wearing the simple red cross on his helmet or armband was a secular savior, the doc who would brave machine gun fire to reach a wounded comrade. But in the Pacific, this symbol of mercy had the opposite effect on the enemy. The Japanese military did not share this reverence. They did not have a comparable system of frontline medics. Their medical care was rudimentary, and a wounded soldier was often seen as a drain on resources. They viewed the American medic not as a healer, but as a high-value tactical target. Japanese snipers were trained to identify and eliminate medics. They knew that killing a doc did more than just kill one man. It demoralized the entire platoon. It meant that a wounded GI would be left to die, his cries for help echoing unanswered across the battlefield. This made the medic one of the most hunted men on the field. Many medics, in fact, stopped wearing the Red Cross, as it had become a bullseye. This led to a terrible calculus. When a medic approached a wounded Japanese soldier, he was caught in a vortex of conflicting doctrines. His own training, his very oath, compelled him to offer aid. But his battlefield experience screamed that this was a trap. American troops had learned, through bloody experience on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and Saipan, that a wounded Japanese soldier was often a booby trap. GIs would call out to medics, "Don't go near him, Doc. He's faking." The medic was forced to make an impossible choice, to uphold his humanity and risk immolation, or to adopt the callousness of the battlefield and let a man die. It was in this moment of supreme tension, the healer versus the suicide bomber, that the entire Pacific War was distilled into a single, fatal confrontation. To understand why a dying man would reach for a grenade, one must first understand his mind. The Imperial Japanese soldier had been psychologically conditioned from birth. He was taught Kodo, the imperial way, a belief system that elevated the emperor to the status of a living god. Service to the emperor was the highest calling, and death in his service was the greatest honor. This was reinforced by the nation's propaganda. Japanese newsreels and posters never depicted the white devils as human. Americans were portrayed as beasts, as gangsters, as degenerate monsters who took pleasure in torture. Soldiers were shown fabricated photographs and films purporting to show American troops mutilating Japanese war dead. They were told repeatedly that if captured, their fate would be slow, agonizing, and unspeakable. This propaganda had a specific, tactical purpose. It eliminated the option of surrender. It ensured that the Japanese soldier would fight to the last man, because death by his own hand, or in a final charge, was infinitely preferable to the imagined horrors of capture. Therefore, when the wounded soldier on Okinawa saw Doc Peterson, he did not see a healer. He saw the monster from the posters. He saw the embodiment of the barbarian who, he was promised, would desecrate his body and soul. His hand did not move to the grenade out of simple hatred. It moved out of a deeply ingrained terror. The grenade was not a weapon of attack, but a tool of defense. His last honorable escape from a fate he believed was worse than death. It was the final programmed act of a man whose mind had been weaponized against himself. The medic, Doc Peterson, carried an entirely different burden. He too was a product of his culture, but it was a culture that held the opposite values. His doctrine was the Geneva Convention. His philosophy was the Hippocratic Oath, or its military equivalent, to conserve the fighting strength, which meant saving everyone. This was not a theoretical ideal. It was a daily, grinding reality. The medic saw more gore than any frontline rifleman. He worked in an abattoir, his hands perpetually stained, his ears filled with the screams of men he considered brothers. His entire existence was focused on reversing the effects of the war, one dressing at a time. But the Pacific Theater created a terrible moral conflict. The medic was trained to see a wounded man as a patient, regardless of uniform. The battlefield taught him to see a wounded Japanese soldier as a threat. This created a profound cognitive dissonance. Countless reports from veterans describe this exact dilemma. A medic would hear a cry for help, move toward it, and be warned off by his own men. "It's a trap, Doc." The Japanese became notorious for feigning injury, for booby-trapping their own bodies. Every act of compassion was weighed against the instinct for survival. Many medics developed a hard shell, refusing to treat any Japanese until the area was completely secured and the enemy searched. But for others, the impulse to heal was too strong. They could not turn it off. They were men who had signed up to save lives, forced to operate in a war where saving a life could be the last mistake they ever made. For the American infantrymen, the Japanese soldier's final act was not a philosophical concept. It was a deadly tactical reality. The U.S. military had to develop new procedures just to handle the Japanese dead and wounded. A body was not a body. It was a potential unexploded ordnance, UXO. This was a deliberate Japanese tactic. Wounded soldiers were encouraged to become booby traps. In some island defenses, commanders would order their wounded men to be given extra grenades and placed in strategic locations to wait for the Americans to advance. This tactic was chillingly effective. A single soldier, feigning death, could wait for a U.S. patrol, or even better, a medic and his stretcher bearers, to cluster around him. By detonating his grenade, he could take out 3 or 4 men, including the critical healer. The psychological impact of this was immense. It forced American soldiers to become callous. It became standard procedure to clear Japanese bodies by firing a round into them, or by approaching them with extreme, time-consuming caution. This tactic also had a grim, logistical component. The American soldier was part of an industrial war machine. If he was wounded, he was a valuable asset to be recovered. He would be pulled off the line, given plasma, evacuated to a field hospital, then a ship, and eventually be home. The system was designed to save him. The Japanese soldier was expendable. His logistical chain was broken. By 1945, there were no ships coming to rescue him. There were no field hospitals with plasma. His army had abandoned him to his fate. His final grenade was the only logistical support he had left. It was the only way a single dying man, with no hope of rescue, could still inflict damage on the industrial colossus that was crushing his world. The encounter between the medic and the soldier was, at its core, a collision of 2 irreconcilable worlds. The American medic, Doc Peterson, represented a culture of individualism, optimism, and the sanctity of a single human life. His kit was filled with the products of that culture: penicillin, blood plasma, morphine. These were expensive, technologically advanced tools designed to save one person. His actions were those of a man who believed, fundamentally, that life was worth saving. The Japanese soldier represented a culture that prioritized the collective over the individual. His highest virtue was not living, but dying well. His honor was tied to the group, to the nation, to the emperor. Surrender was a selfish act because it placed his individual survival above the honor of the collective. His propaganda-fueled terror of the white devil was just a symptom of this larger cultural divide. When the American medic offered his hand, he was not just offering medical aid. He was offering a worldview. He was saying, "Your life, here and now, has value." To the Japanese soldier, this was an incomprehensible, even insulting gesture. It was an alien philosophy. His hand on the grenade was his final violent rejection of that philosophy, and his ultimate embrace of his own. The space between the medic's outstretched hand and the soldier's grenade was the cultural gulf of the entire Pacific War. The moment freezes. The rain on Okinawa, the distant rattle of a Nambu machine gun, the smell of cordite. It all fades away, replaced by the deafening silence between these two men. Doc Peterson is paralyzed. He is 19 years old. His training, his instinct, his entire being is screaming at him to run, to dive for cover. He knows the rule. He has seen the training films. He has heard the stories from veterans of Paliliu. A Japanese soldier with a pulled pin is not a patient. He is a bomb. He is already dead. The only goal now is to not join him. He can see the soldier's hand, white-knuckled, pressing the grenade cap flat against his own chest. He is holding the safety lever down. If that hand relaxes or opens, the lever will fly off, the fuse will ignite, and in 3 seconds, they will both be gone. The Japanese soldier stares back, his face a mask of pain and defiant hatred. He is waiting. He is waiting for the American to make a move, to shoot him, to try and grab the grenade, any act of aggression that will justify his final act of self-destruction. He is offering a terrible choice: kill me or die with me. Peterson has no rifle. His .45 pistol is holstered, an afterthought. His hands are empty, save for the roll of gauze he had been about to apply. He looks at the soldier's shredded back, then at the grenade, then back at the man's eyes. This is the turning point. It is not a battle of armies. It is a battle of two wills compressed into a patch of mud. Peterson can follow the rules of survival, or he can follow the rules of his oath. He cannot do both. He makes his choice. He does not run. He does not reach for his pistol. He stays perfectly still, lowers his hand slowly, palms open, showing they are empty. He does not shout. He holds the soldier's gaze, and then he speaks, not in anger, not in fear, but in a calm, low voice, the voice he uses to soothe a panicked GI in shock. He says the only word that matters. Water. He says it again, still not moving. Water, you, drink. He slowly, deliberately, reaches not for the grenade, not for a weapon, but for the canteen on his own belt. The Japanese soldier's eyes flicker. This is not in the script. This is not what the white devil is supposed to do. He was expecting a bayonet, a bullet, a boot. He was not expecting kindness. The word mizu, water, is universal. He is dying of thirst. His mouth is cracked, filled with mud. But his indoctrination is strong. He tightens his grip on the grenade. This is a trick. It must be a trick. Doc! Peterson continues his gamble. He keeps his movements slow, deliberate, non-threatening. He unclips his canteen. The metallic snap of the canteen cover sounds as loud as a gunshot in the silence. He holds it out, still kneeling, just out of the soldier's lunging range, but close enough to show the offer is real. Water, Peterson says again. He is not a medic treating an enemy. He is a man offering a drink to another man who is suffering. The Japanese soldier's arm trembles. His entire worldview is short-circuiting. The propaganda posters are dissolving in the Okinawan rain. The monster who was supposed to torture him is offering him water. The hatred in his eyes begins to compete with a new, more powerful emotion. Profound, agonizing confusion. He is caught between two worlds, the honor-bound duty to die and the simple, animal instinct to live. The grenade in his hand is the symbol of his past, his training, his emperor. The canteen in the medic's hand is a symbol of his present, his pain, and a future he was told was impossible. His gaze drops from Peterson's eyes to the canteen, then back. He is a man on a psychological precipice. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tension in his hand begins to ease. The knuckles, white with pressure, regain a fraction of their color. He does not release the grenade. Not yet. But he does not open his hand. Peterson sees the change. He pushes the canteen forward slightly, sliding it across the mud. "It's okay," he says, the words meaningless, but the tone, everything. The Japanese soldier's hand, the one not holding the grenade, trembles as it moves toward the canteen. His other hand, the one with the bomb, remains frozen to his chest. He is trapped, unable to accept the water without letting go of his death. And then, with a small, shuddering sigh that sounds more like a sob, his fingers uncurl from the Type 97 grenade. The safety lever stays in place, held by his palm. He is not disarmed, but he has paused his death. He has chosen, for one more second, to live. The medic sees the hand relax. This is the moment. He moves, not with speed, but with purpose. He doesn't grab the grenade. He moves past it. To the wound. To the man. The spell is broken, not by force, but by a simple, impossible act of humanity. The tension that had held the world in place snaps, but the danger is far from over. The grenade is still live, the pin still out. The Japanese soldier, exhausted by his internal battle, gasps for the water, his focus broken. "Doc." Peterson acts with practiced speed. "My hand," he says, motioning clearly. He places his own hand over the soldier's, firmly clamping down on the grenade and its safety lever. The soldier, now in shock, does not resist. Peterson uses his other hand to carefully, methodically, retrieve the grenade from the soldier's grasp. He secures the lever, finds the pin on the mud-caked uniform, and with a grunt, forces it back into its hole. The weapon is safe. Only then does he become a medic again. He gives the man a sip of water, then immediately turns to the wound. It is bad. A deep, jagged shrapnel tear across the back. The soldier is bleeding out. Peterson works fast, his hands no longer trembling. He sprinkles sulfa powder directly into the wound to fight infection, a miracle of American logistics. He applies a pressure dressing, his movements firm and professional. The Japanese soldier watches him, his face pale, his eyes wide with a new, disoriented fear. This is the after. He had prepared for death, not for this. He is now a prisoner, a status his culture equates with shame. He is being touched, tended to, saved, by the devil he was ordered to kill. Peterson finishes the dressing and gives the man a morphine syrette, injecting it into his thigh to dull the pain. He then raises his arm and, for the first time, calls out, "Stretcher bearers, live one." The arrival of the stretcher bearers is a new crisis. They are not medics. They are riflemen, hardened infantry, whose friends have been killed by men just like the one on the ground. They arrive, see the uniform, and their faces harden. "Doc? What the hell? He's a goner, and he's a Jap." Peterson stands up, positioning himself between them and his patient. "He's a POW, he says, his voice flat. "And he's my patient. Get him on the stretcher." The riflemen curse, but they obey the medic. It is a moment of profound, surreal bureaucracy in the middle of a battlefield. The journey back is its own kind of hell. The stretcher bearers are rough, angry, and make no effort to avoid the mud-filled shell holes. They are carrying a man they see as cargo, not a patient. The Japanese soldier, drifting on a cloud of morphine, is dimly aware of the hostile world around him. He is carried past the American lines, past the endless supply dumps, past men who look at him with open hatred. Then, He arrives at the battalion aid station, and his world shatters for a second time. The aid station is a large tent, chaotic and bloody, filled with American wounded. Surgeons in stained fatigues move quickly, shouting orders. The smell of ether, blood, and coffee hangs in the air. He is placed on the ground, in a line with other wounded men, some American, some Japanese. He braces himself for the torture, the execution. A new medic, a corpsman, approaches him. He doesn't see the soldier's uniform. He only sees the triage tag Peterson had placed on him. The corpsman checks the dressing, then hangs a bottle of clear liquid on a pole. Plasma. He inserts the needle into the soldier's arm. This is the ultimate, incomprehensible act. The enemy is giving him blood. They are wasting one of their most precious medical resources, a resource his own army did not possess in the field, on a man they had been trying to kill minutes earlier. He sees an American GI on the cot next to him, his leg gone, being given the exact same treatment. He is not a monster. He is not a prisoner. He is a patient. This simple, logistical act of medical care is more devastating to his psyche, his spirit, than any artillery barrage. The propaganda had lied. The devils were not devils. They were men, operating under a different, baffling code of conduct, a code that separated the combatant from the wounded. The grenade in his hand was an act of faith in a doctrine that had just been proven false. The plasma in his arm was the proof. War is a relentless engine of dehumanization. It sorts the world into two simple, brutal categories: us and them. The entire machinery of combat, from propaganda posters to rifle sights, is designed to reinforce this divide, to make the enemy an other that can be killed without conscience. In the Pacific, this machinery was brutally effective. It created a war of total annihilation, a place where mercy was a fatal flaw and surrender was not an option. But the story of the medic and the wounded soldier is a story that breaks the machine. It is a moment where the overwhelming logic of war, to kill, is interrupted by an even more fundamental human impulse, to heal. The medic's action was not just an act of kindness, it was an act of profound, almost reckless, defiance. He defied his own survival instinct, he defied the tactical reality of the battlefield, and he defied the very hatred that fueled the conflict. In offering his canteen, he was rejecting the war's simple categories and asserting a more complex truth, that the man in front of him was not just them, he was a him. That single, humane gesture, a sip of water, a roll of gauze, was more powerful than the soldier's grenade. It did not just save a life, it dismantled a worldview. It proved that even in the heart of the 20th century's most brutal conflict, in the mud of Okinawa, the shared humanity between two men, however brief, could be more potent than the doctrines that ordered them to kill.